The champagne was the wrong temperature. That was the thought Kang Hyun-woo was having at the exact moment his life changed, that the champagne the boutique attendant had placed in his hand was 2 degrees too warm, and that he should mention it, and that he wouldn't, because the woman standing on the elevated platform in front of him was trying on her 4th gown of the afternoon, and the attendants were watching him with the particular attentiveness of people whose job required them to read the expressions of men waiting for the moment their fiancée found the right dress. He smiled when he was supposed to smile. He nodded when he was supposed to nod. He said beautiful when the head attendant looked at him for confirmation, and it wasn't a lie. Seo-yeon was beautiful. She was always beautiful. She had never in the 18 months of their engagement been anything other than precisely and correctly beautiful, but the word arrived in his mouth from somewhere outside himself, assembled, without feeling the way all the correct words in his life arrived now. He was good at this. He had always been good at this. The boutique was the most exclusive in Seoul. 3 floors of white marble and natural light, gowns arranged like art installations along the walls, the kind of establishment that did not advertise because its clientele arrived through referral only. Seo-yeon had chosen it with the same precise efficiency she brought to everything, had circled the date on the calendar 4 weeks in advance, had prepared a list of silhouettes and fabrics she wanted to consider. She was organized. She was thoughtful. She was the daughter of a political ally and the product of a family that had been grooming her for exactly this kind of marriage since she was old enough to understand what alliances meant. She was nothing like Zara. He did not allow himself to complete that comparison. He was practiced at catching it before it finished forming and redirecting his attention to whatever was in front of him. It was a skill he had developed over 2 years with the same discipline he had applied to everything difficult in his life, methodically, consistently, without mercy for the parts of himself that resisted. He was mid-redirect when the boutique doors opened. He felt it before he saw it. A shift in the room's atmosphere, the specific quality of attention changing, the way a space recalibrates when something enters it that wasn't expected. He turned toward the door with the instinct of a man whose survival had always depended on knowing what was entering a room before anyone else did. Kwame Mensah walked through the door first. Hyun-woo knew him immediately. Not from memory. They had met only twice, briefly, during the 14 months, because Zara's family was close but she was private about her worlds, kept them from overlapping more than necessary. But Kwame Mensah, at 34, was not a man who disappeared into rooms. He was tall, broader than Hyun-woo remembered, the specific physical confidence of a man who had spent 2 years expanding into his own power, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, his expression the particular composed neutrality of someone who has decided exactly what this moment is before walking into it. Behind him, holding his hand, was a child. A boy. 3 years old. Possibly 4. Small even for that age, wearing a pale blue shirt and dark trousers that someone had dressed him in with care, his natural hair neat, his posture. And this was the thing, this was the specific thing that moved through Hyun-woo's chest like something breaking. His posture was the posture of a child who had inherited stillness. The same quality of stillness Hyun-woo had been told all his life was intimidating. The stillness of a man who did not need to fill silence to own it, sitting on a small face that had no business carrying it at this age. The boy had his jawline. The boy had his eyes. The boy was looking directly at him with the specific calm of a child who has been shown a photograph enough times to recognize a face when he finally sees it in person. Hyun-woo's champagne glass did not shatter. He held it. He would give himself that much. He held it, his hand completely steady by the training of 15 years. While every other system inside him went entirely offline. Seo-yeon was still on the platform. The head attendant was still holding a veil. The boutique was still playing its low-string music. All of it continued around him, like weather. Kwame Mensah walked toward him with a dress box under his left arm, ivory ribbon, no logo, wrapped with the care of someone who understood presentation, and stopped 2 feet away. He looked at Hyun-woo with the expression of a man who has prepared his composure like armor and is wearing every piece of it. Kwame, Hyun-woo said. His voice was completely steady. He would give himself that too. Hyun-woo, Kwame said. Not Mr. Kong. Not a title. Just his name, delivered with the flat equality of a man who considered himself nobody's subordinate in any room. He held out the dress box.
"From Zara," he said.
She made it herself. The boy looked up at Hyun-woo from Kwame's side and said nothing. He was simply there, present in the way that children are present when they have been raised by honest people, without performance, without agenda, with the complete factual reality of his own existence. Hyun-woo took the box.
He didn't know why.
His hands made the decision before his mind could intervene, which was the first time in 15 years that had happened. Seo-yeon had stepped down from the platform. She was beside him now, her expression the careful neutral of a woman who is reading a room very fast and choosing her response before she has all the information.
She looked at the box. She looked at the boy.
She looked at Kwame Mensah's face and then at Hyun-woo's face, and the 2 seconds that followed were the longest 2 seconds in the boutique's history. "Open it," she said quietly. Not a suggestion. He opened it. The dress was folded inside ivory tissue paper, layers of it, the kind of wrapping that takes time and intention. Beneath the first layer of tissue was an envelope.
Cream.
His name on the front in handwriting, he recognized the way you recognize a voice you haven't heard in years. Immediately, in the body before the mind, something cellular responding to something it was trained to know. Beneath the envelope, just visible through the tissue, the edge of a photograph. He picked up the envelope first. Opened it. 4 sentences in her handwriting. He read them once. Then he stood in the middle of the most expensive bridal boutique in Seoul holding a piece of paper and understanding, with a clarity that was almost physical, that the 2 years he had spent building a life that looked correct from every angle had just collapsed in 4 handwritten sentences and a dress box delivered by a child with his own face. Welcome to Afro Soul Connect. On today's episode, you get a dose of culture clash, forbidden love, family pressure, second chances, and an unforgettable reunion. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification icon so you never miss a new story when it drops. And don't forget to send this story to a friend or family member you think would love it. Also, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now, let's dive back into this amazing story. To understand what that dress box cost everyone in that boutique, you have to go back 2 years and 4 months. You have to go back to Accra. Not the Accra of government buildings and hotel lobbies and the transactional spaces where Hyun-woo usually operated when business brought him to West Africa. The real Accra. The one that existed in the spaces between his scheduled meetings, the markets and the evening air, and the specific quality of light at 5 in the afternoon that made everything look like it was being lit from inside. He had come for a shipping agreement. 3 weeks, his assistant had said. In and out. The Mensah Group controlled the largest private port facility on Ghana's coast, and the Kang organization needed access to it without involving intermediaries who asked inconvenient questions. It was a straightforward negotiation between 2 organizations that understood the value of discretion. The first meeting was with Kwame Mensah, who was at that point still building rather than built, sharp, watchful, already carrying the specific gravity of someone who understood exactly what his family's infrastructure was worth and had no intention of undervaluing it. They negotiated for 3 days and arrived at terms that satisfied both sides without either of them fully trusting the other, which was the correct outcome for a first agreement between 2 organizations like theirs. On the 4th day, Hyun-woo's driver took a wrong turn. It was genuinely a wrong turn. Not fate, not design, just a street name that sounded similar to another, and they ended up on a narrow road lined with fabric stalls and small workshops with their doors open to the afternoon. He was about to redirect when he saw her. Zara Mensah was standing outside a workshop with a length of deep orange fabric draped over one arm and a conversation happening with the workshop owner that she was clearly winning. She was wearing a simple fitted dress in the same fabric she was holding, as though she'd made the sample herself to prove the point, and she was gesturing with her free hand with the specific confidence of a woman who knows exactly what she wants and has never found it difficult to say so. She was the most completely alive person he had seen in recent memory. His driver stopped at a traffic obstruction ahead. Hyun-woo got out of the car. He had no plan. That was the first unusual thing. Kang Hyun-woo did not approach situations without a plan. He had moved through his entire adult life with the certainty of a man who had thought 12 steps ahead of every conversation before it began. But he was out of the car and walking toward her before any version of strategy had time to form, and by the time she turned and found him standing at the edge of her conversation with the workshop owner, it was too late to retreat without it being stranger than proceeding. "You look lost," she said. Not unkindly, just accurately. "I took a wrong turn," he said. "Most interesting things in Accra start that way," she said. She looked at him with the direct, assessing gaze of a woman who is deciding something in real time. "You're the Korean man doing the port deal with my brother." "Yes," he said. "He didn't mention you were going to be wandering our fabric district," she said. "It wasn't planned," he said. She smiled, slow, specific, the smile of a woman who finds something genuinely amusing rather than politely so. "Nothing planned ever ends up here," she said. "This street only finds you when you're supposed to be found." He stayed for 2 hours. He watched her negotiate, create, instruct, and laugh with the kind of people his world never produced. People who made things with their hands and were proud of it without needing anyone to tell them they should be. She bought 3 bolts of the orange fabric and had them loaded onto a small truck with the efficiency of someone who had done this 100 times. She answered his questions about her work with the thoroughness of a woman who loved what she did and had never once been made to feel it was less valuable than anything else. She did not ask him about his work. He noticed. When the truck was loaded, she looked at him and said, "There is a place 20 minutes from here that makes the best kelawil you will eat in your life, and you look like someone who has been eating hotel food for 4 days."
3 days, he said. Close enough, she said.
"Come or don't. Either way, I'm going."
He went.
That was the beginning. Not dramatic. Not engineered. A wrong turn and a woman who didn't look at him the way anyone in his world looked at him, with calculation, with deference, with the specific wariness of people who knew what he was and were always aware of it. She looked at him the way you look at a person. Just a person. Sitting across a small table eating fried plantain in the Accra evening and talking about fabric and architecture and the specific smell of the city after rain like none of it had weight beyond what it actually was. He changed his flight. 3 weeks became 6. The port agreement was signed in the 2nd week. The remaining 4 weeks were not about business, and both of them knew it, and neither of them said so because naming it would have made it something that needed to be managed, and neither of them wanted to manage it yet. He called his Seoul office every morning and handled what required handling, and spent the rest of his time in Zara's world, her workshop, her markets, her family home on Sunday evenings where her mother fed him things he couldn't name, and her father watched him with the quiet assessment of a man deciding whether someone was worthy of his daughter and had not yet reached a verdict. "He likes you," Zara told him one evening. "He hasn't said anything to me," Hyun-woo said. "My father doesn't use words for people he's still deciding about," she said. "He's using his eyes. That means you're still in consideration." "And when he's decided against someone? He stops looking," she said simply. He learned her the way he had never learned anything, not through strategy or analysis, but through accumulation. The way she worked through problems out loud, talking to herself in a low-running commentary while she sketched. The way she ate with her whole attention on the food, no phone, no distraction. The way she argued, directly, without cruelty, with the specific commitment of someone who believed that a disagreement between 2 intelligent people should produce something better than the positions they started with. The way she said his name. Not Hyun-woo the way his organization said it, with the weight of everything the name carried. Just Hyun-woo. 2 syllables. Like it was only ever just his name. He flew back to Seoul after 6 weeks. He called her from the plane. He called her from the car. He called her that night from his penthouse, standing at the window looking at the Han River, and they talked until 2 in the morning about nothing significant and everything important. He went back to Accra 6 weeks after that. 14 months. Across 4 countries. Built in the spaces between obligations, in early mornings and late evenings and long calls across time zones, in the specific discipline of 2 people who wanted something that their lives hadn't been built to accommodate and were building it anyway in whatever room they could find. He had never told her what he was, not fully. She knew he was powerful. She knew his money came from sources she was too intelligent to examine too closely. She had never asked the specific questions whose answers would have required her to make a decision about staying. He had never told her about the council. He had never told her about the succession clause buried in his father's organizational charter, the one that had been placed there a decade ago, quietly, in anticipation of exactly this kind of entanglement. The one that required the head of the Kang organization to be married within a defined timeline to a union approved by the council's senior members. He had never told her that Seo Yun's father had been in conversation with his father for 3 years before his father died. He had never told her that the call from the council's chairman, when it finally came on a Tuesday morning in Seoul while Zara was in Accra designing a collection inspired by the colors of the city where they had found each other, had not been a suggestion. He sat with his phone for 47 minutes after the council call ended. Then he called Zara. She picked up on the second ring.
Warm.
Immediate. The way she always was. "I need to tell you something," he said. And she knew. Before he said it, he heard it in the specific quality of her silence. The silence of a woman who has been paying attention and has already assembled the information into something she was hoping wasn't true. "Duty," he said. One word. Because it was the only honest summary of the machine he had been born into. She was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, "Okay, Hyun-woo." Not anger, not tears, just his name. Like she was putting it down somewhere safe before everything changed. She hung up. He disconnected his personal number that afternoon. His assistant handled everything through organizational channels after that.
Clean.
Efficient. The way he handled everything. What he did not know, what was living in the silence on Zara's end of that call, was that she had been sitting in her workshop that morning with a result in her hand that had arrived 20 minutes before he called. A result that changed the shape of everything she was about to agree to lose. A result she had held in both hands and felt the full weight of before his voice came through her phone and made the wait impossible. She sat in her workshop for a very long time after the call ended. Then she called her brother. Kwame Mensah arrived at his sister's workshop in 20 minutes. He was between meetings. He was always between meetings at that point, the Mensah group expanding at a pace that made his calendar look like an architectural blueprint rather than a schedule. But he dropped everything the moment he heard the specific quality of her voice on the phone. Not crying. Worse than crying. The flat, specific tone of a woman who has absorbed something enormous and is holding very still so it doesn't spill. He found her sitting on the floor of her workshop surrounded by fabric samples she hadn't been touching, the pregnancy test on the work table behind her like a document waiting to be processed. He sat on the floor beside her, without saying anything. That was the right thing. Kwame had always known when words were required and when they weren't, which was one of the reasons he was as good as he was at everything he did.
They sat there for a long time.
"He called this morning," Zara said eventually. "I know," Kwame said. He had his own intelligence. He had known about the council's arrangement for 2 weeks and had been deciding whether to tell her, which was the decision he would carry the longest and regret the most specifically.
He said duty, she said.
Kwame said nothing.
One word, she said.
14 months, and he gave me one word. Zara. I'm not angry, she said. And she meant it. The anger would come later, in waves, at 3 in the morning when the baby kicked and she was alone, and the specific unfairness of it arrived without the armor she wore during daylight hours. But right now, on this floor, she was not angry. She was something more complicated. She was the woman who had known, somewhere beneath every beautiful thing they had built, that a man like Kang Hyun-woo came from a world with requirements she would never fully see. She had chosen to love him anyway. That had been her decision. She owned it. I'm keeping the baby, she said. Kwame looked at her. I know, he said again. And I'm not telling him, she said. This was the part that cost Kwame something. She watched him absorb it, the specific tension of a man who disagreed, and was deciding how much of that disagreement to spend. Zara, he said carefully.
He made his choice, she said.
He doesn't get to make mine too. The child deserves a father who chooses to be present, she said. Not one who is informed of an obligation and arrives out of duty. I have had enough of his duty. She looked at her brother with the expression she wore when something was permanently decided. I will raise this child. I will tell them the truth when they are old enough. And I will never use my child as a reason for a man to stay where he doesn't want to be. Kwame looked at his sister for a long time. Then he put his arm around her and said nothing, because there was nothing to say to a woman who had made a decision from her deepest self that was both wrong and right simultaneously and knew the cost of both. "I have one condition," he said eventually. "What?" "When the time comes," he said, "I get to deliver the message. My way. On my timeline." She looked at him. "What message?" "That depends on what he does with the next 2 years," Kwame said. And he said it with the particular calm of a man who had already begun planning something and was in no hurry because good plans needed time to become inevitable. She didn't ask further. She trusted him the way she had always trusted him, completely, the way you trust the person who has always shown up without being asked. The following months were the hardest of her life and the most generative simultaneously. She had always understood that creation and difficulty were not opposites, that the best things she had ever made had come from pressure rather than ease. She applied that understanding to everything now. She kept her workshop. She expanded it. She hired 2 assistants in the 4th month and a production manager in the 6th. She designed through her pregnancy, with the specific focus of a woman who understood that her child was going to arrive into a world she was responsible for building, and she had better build it well. Her mother came to stay for the last 2 months, and the first 3 after the birth. Her father visited and held his grandson for an entire afternoon without putting him down, speaking to him quietly in Twi about the Mensah family history with the thoroughness of a man formally introducing someone to their inheritance. The boy arrived in November. She named him Ibo, meaning born on Tuesday, which was the day of the phone call, which was the day everything changed, which felt like the right anchor for his beginning. Ibo Mensah. She gave him both names. Not for Hyun-woo, for the child's right to know the full architecture of where he came from. He was born looking exactly like his father. Not partially. Not in one feature or another. Completely. The jawline. The eyes. The specific quality of stillness that arrived before any child should have developed it, as though it had been inherited directly rather than learned. Her mother looked at him the first morning and said nothing for a long time, and then said, in Twi, "This child is going to make someone very uncomfortable one day." "That's the plan," Zara said. She designed her fashion label around him. Not literally. She didn't put him in campaigns or use his existence as material. But the collection she launched in his first year was called Foundation, and it was about structure and inheritance and the things that hold when everything visible falls away, and it sold out in 3 countries in the first week and was written about in 4 international publications and put Mensah design on the map in ways that the previous 6 years of careful building had been working toward. Kwame watched it happen from a close distance and said nothing except, during a call in the 2nd year, "You know what you're doing." "I have always known what I'm doing," she said. "I know," he said. "I just like saying it out loud." Meanwhile, in Seoul, Kang Hyun-woo was building a life that looked exactly correct. The engagement to Seo-yeon had been announced through appropriate channels 6 weeks after the council call. The political alliance it represented was everything the council had promised: doors opening, territory consolidating, the Kang organization moving into positions it had been trying to reach for a decade. His father's senior advisors, now serving the organization under his leadership, told him regularly that this was the right decision. The necessary decision. The decision his father would have made. He agreed with all of it. He went through his days with the precision of a man who had decided to be excellent at what remained once you removed everything inconvenient. He was an excellent organizational leader. He was an excellent fiancé, present, considerate, attentive to Seo-yeon in the ways that mattered to her and the relationship they were constructing together. He was an excellent son to the memory of his father and an excellent servant to the legacy that memory demanded. He was hollow in a way that only revealed itself at 4 in the morning when the armor was off, and the specific quality of Seoul's pre-dawn silence reminded him of a workshop in Accra and orange fabric and a woman who had looked at him like a person. He had deleted her number himself. He had never looked for another way to reach her, because looking would have meant something he was not prepared to mean. He had kept nothing, no photographs, no messages, nothing physical that could become a reason to return to something he had closed. He told himself this was discipline. He told himself this was what it looked like to be the head of a legacy rather than just a man. He was telling himself this on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 years and 1 month after the call, when his personal assistant appeared at the door of his home office with an expression that did not belong in a professional interaction.
"Mr. Kang," she said.
"There's a man in the lobby. He says his name is Kwame Mensah. He says he has something for you that requires personal delivery." Hyun-woo sat with that sentence for 3 full seconds. "Tell him I will be down," he said. His voice was completely steady. He sat alone in his office for 30 more seconds after she left. Then he straightened his jacket, and he went downstairs. But Kwame was not in the lobby. Because Hyun-woo's assistant had gotten confused about the timing, the message had arrived that morning, the delivery was scheduled for the afternoon, and the afternoon delivery was not to his home office.
It was to the bridal boutique,
where Seo-yeon was already waiting, where the appointment had been on the calendar for 4 weeks, where the attendants were chilling champagne to exactly the wrong temperature. He arrived at the boutique to find Seo-yeon already on the platform in the second gown of the afternoon. He took the glass they offered him. He stood in the correct position. He smiled when he was supposed to smile. He was mid-redirect, catching the thought of Zara before it finished forming and turning his attention deliberately back to the room, when the boutique doors opened and Kwame Mensah walked through them with a child by the hand and a dress box under his arm. And everything Hyun-woo had spent 2 years building to look like a life stopped being convincing to anyone in the room. The box was in his hands. The letter was open. The boutique was completely silent except for the string music that nobody had thought to stop. Seo-yeon stood 3 feet away with an expression Hyun-woo would spend a long time afterward trying to correctly describe. Not anger. Not the sharp betrayal of a woman discovering something hidden. Something more complicated. The expression of a woman who is receiving a confirmation rather than a revelation, which meant she had already known something was present even if she hadn't known its shape until now. Kwame stood to Hyun-woo's left with the specific composure of a man who is prepared for every version of this moment and is comfortable in all of them. Ibo stood beside his uncle holding the hem of Kwame's jacket with the relaxed grip of a child who had been told where they were going and what they were doing and had decided to trust the information. Hyun-woo read the letter a second time. 4 sentences. The first sentence said that she hoped he was well and that she meant it, which was its own quiet devastation. That after everything, the first thing she chose to say was that she genuinely wished him well. The second sentence said that she had made this dress for a wedding that didn't happen and had decided it deserved to exist in the world rather than in a box in her workshop, and that since he was having a wedding it seemed like the right moment to send it forward. The third sentence said that the child in the boutique with her brother was his son's name was Ibo and that Ibo knew his father's name and his father's face and had been raised with the truth as completely as she could give it to him and would have questions one day that only Hyun-woo could answer, and she trusted him to be present for those questions when they came. The fourth sentence said, "I am well. I am more than well. I wanted you to know that." He read it 3 times. Then he put the letter down and picked up the photograph. Zara in the dress she had made, standing in what looked like her workshop, the fabric bolts visible behind her, the specific quality of Accra afternoon light through an open door. The dress was extraordinary. Of course it was. Deep ivory with detailed embroidery at the collar and cuffs that he recognized as the Adinkra symbols she had explained to him once during a long afternoon in a market. She had made it for herself. She had made it knowing exactly what she was making. She was looking directly into the camera with the expression he had been trying not to remember for 2 years. Not challenging. Not performing. Just completely, devastatingly present. The specific expression of a woman who has survived something and come out the other side more fully herself than she was before it. Beside her, his hand wrapped around 2 of her fingers with the possessive ease of a small child who has claimed something, stood Ibo. The photograph made it impossible to continue any of the internal arguments Hyun-woo had been running for 2 years. There was no version of himself that could look at that photograph and maintain the story he had been telling himself about necessary decisions and the requirements of legacy and the specific discipline of a man who closed things and moved forward. He was a man who had a son. His son was 3 years old and standing in a photograph in Accra holding his mother's fingers and looking at the camera with Hyun-woo's own face on a small body that Hyun-woo had never held. He became aware that the string music had stopped. He became aware that Seo-yeon had moved, She was standing closer, not looking at the photograph but at his face, reading his face the way she had always been quietly excellent at reading rooms and the people inside them. "May I?" she said quietly. Not a demand. Almost a formality. He handed her the photograph. She looked at it for a long time. The boutique attendants had arranged themselves with the careful invisibility of people who understood they were witnessing something private and were trying to occupy as little space as possible. Kwame had not moved. He stood with his hands in his pockets and Ibo at his side with the specific patience of a man who had decided he would give this room exactly the time it needed and not 1 second more. Seo-yeon handed the photograph back. She looked at Hyun-woo with an expression that was the most honest thing she had shown him in 18 months of engagement. "You should go to her," she said. "Seo-yeon."
Hyun-woo, she said.
His name delivered with the flat, clear certainty of a woman who has made a decision before the conversation began. "I am not a fool. I have never been a fool. I knew when we began this that the right word for it was arrangement rather than love, and I accepted that because I believed arrangements could become something real if both people chose them consistently." She paused. "I have been choosing consistently. I don't think you have been. I think you have been performing a choice while carrying something else. And now that something else is standing in this boutique in a pale blue shirt, and it has your face." She looked at the dress box still in his hands. "She made her own dress," she said. And in those 4 words was a recognition woman to woman about what that meant. "I'm sorry," he said. And he meant it at a depth that surprised even him. "Don't be sorry," she said. "Be honest. That's harder and it's what's actually required." She reached out and took the champagne glass from his other hand, the one he had been holding for the last 10 minutes without drinking from, and set it on the nearest surface.
"Go," she said.
He looked at Kwame. Kwame looked back at him with the expression of a man who has been waiting 2 years for this specific moment and had imagined it many ways and was finding the actual version more complicated than any of them. "We need to talk," Hyun-woo said. "Yes," Kwame said. "We do. But not here." "Where is she?" Kwame looked at him for 3 full seconds, measuring something, deciding something. "She's in Seoul," he said. "She came for a Fashion Week collaboration. She doesn't know I'm here today." The information landed with its full weight. Zara was in Seoul. She had come to the same city at the same time and had sent her brother to deliver a box to a bridal boutique without telling her, which meant the timing was Kwame's choice and Kwame had chosen it knowing she was here, knowing what it would set in motion. Drop a comment right now before the story goes any further. Do you think Zara knew her brother was doing this today? And do you think Seo-yeon deserved more? Or did she handle this with the kind of grace most people couldn't manage? Tell me your city and tell me what you think. Kwame gave him an address. He didn't give it easily. He gave it the way you give something valuable to someone who has not yet proven they deserve it, with conditions attached in the quality of the silence that accompanied the writing of it, with the particular weight of a man who has watched his sister rebuild herself from the inside out and has not forgotten the specific shape of what required rebuilding. They stood on the pavement outside the boutique, the dress box still in Hyun-woo's hands because he had not put it down, the afternoon cold and gray in the specific way of Seoul October, and Kwame looked at him with an assessment that reminded him of the Accra port negotiation 2 years ago. The same precision, the same willingness to take exactly as long as was needed. "I need you to understand something before you go there," Kwame said. "Tell me," Hyun-woo said. "She is not waiting for you," Kwame said. "She has not been waiting for you. She built something extraordinary from what you left her with, and she is proud of it, and she should be. The dress, the letter, the photograph, that is not an invitation. That is closure delivered with dignity. You need to understand the difference before you stand in front of her." "Then why tell me where she is?" Hyun-woo said. Kwame was quiet for a moment. "Because Ibo asked me last month if his father knew what he looked like," he said. "And I couldn't tell him yes. And I decided I would rather deal with the consequences of this than look at that boy again and not have an answer." He looked at Hyun-woo steadily. "My condition is simple. Whatever happens next, whatever she decides, whatever you feel, whatever the story becomes, Ibo is at the center of it. Not the organization. Not the council. Not whatever you need to manage on your end. Ibo first. Always." "Yes," Hyun-woo said, without hesitation. Kwame looked at him for one more second. Then he took Ibo's hand and walked to his car without looking back. Hyun-woo stood on the pavement and looked at the address on the piece of paper. Then he called his driver. The hotel where Zara was staying for Fashion Week was 40 minutes from the boutique in afternoon traffic. Hyun-woo sat in the back of the car with the dress box on the seat beside him and the photograph in his hand, and did something he had not permitted himself in 2 years, which was to think about her without managing the thinking. He thought about the workshop, the orange fabric, the Kella wheel at the small table, the way she had looked at him the first night like he was a person and not a position, and how entirely disorienting that had been after a lifetime of being looked at as the latter. He thought about the 14 months. Not in the careful, contained way he had occasionally allowed himself, keeping it at a specific emotional distance to make it bearable, but fully. The Sunday evenings at her family home. Her father's eventual, wordless approval. The flight he had changed, and then changed again. The calls across time zones. The specific quality of being known by someone who had no agenda in the knowing. He thought about the phone call. He had told himself for 2 years that it was the right decision. He had built an entire internal architecture around that conviction. The duty, the legacy, the specific requirements of a life that had been shaped before he was old enough to shape it himself. He had been meticulous about maintaining that architecture because he understood that if any part of it gave way, the whole structure would become uninhabitable. The photograph had given way the entire structure in under 30 seconds. The car stopped outside the hotel. He sat for a moment. Then he got out with the dress box under his arm and walked through the lobby with the same deliberate pace he brought to everything important. Unhurried, no performance of confidence, just the actual thing. He asked for her room at the desk. The desk told him, politely, that they could not provide guest room information. He called Kwame. Kwame answered on the 3rd ring with the specific tone of a man who had been expecting this call and was choosing how much to enjoy it. "Lobby won't give you the room," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," Hyun-woo said. "Call this number," Kwame said. "Tell whoever answers that Kwame said the timing was right." He hung up before Hyun-woo could respond. Hyun-woo looked at the number Kwame had sent. Then he called it. It rang 4 times. Then Zara Mensah's voice came through the phone. 2 years. The same voice. Warm even when it wasn't trying to be, with the specific timbre of a woman who spoke from somewhere deep rather than from the surface. "Kwame," she said, because his number had come through as the source. "I told you I didn't want." "It's not Kwame," Hyun-woo said. The silence that followed was the longest he had experienced since the phone call 2 years ago. And in the silence he could hear her, not literally but the way you hear someone you know well and the quality of the air they occupy. He could hear her assembling her composure the way she assembled everything, deliberately, with her whole attention, choosing each piece with care.
"Hyun-woo," she said.
His name. Just his name. 2 syllables. He closed his eyes briefly. "I'm in the lobby," he said. "I know," she said. Because, of course, Kwame had told her. Of course, she had known before she picked up the phone. She had picked up anyway. The pause that followed was hers to fill, or not fill as she chose. "Give me 10 minutes, she said. She came down in 12. He was standing near the lobby window when the elevator opened, and she walked out and crossed the lobby toward him, and the 2 years collapsed into a single second the way long distances collapse the moment you arrive. She was more beautiful than the photograph. That was the first thing. The photograph was extraordinary, but it was still a photograph. It couldn't carry the specific quality of her in motion, the way she moved through a room with the ease of a woman who understood that space was available to her. The way the afternoon light through the hotel lobby window found her deep brown skin and made it glow in the way he had watched Accra light do exactly this, and had understood then that some people are lit differently than others. She was wearing a simple fitted blazer over wide-leg trousers in deep green, her natural hair out and full around her face. She looked like what she was, a woman who had spent 2 years building something real and had arrived at herself more completely than she'd been before. She looked nothing like someone waiting to be found. She looked like someone who had been found already, by herself, by her work, by the life she had built on her own terms. She stopped 2 feet from him. Neither of them spoke immediately. It was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of 2 people who had said the important things already, Him through the absence of 2 years, her through 4 handwritten sentences and a photograph, and we're now in the space after the important things where something else had to be decided.
You got the box, she said.
Yes, he said. Kwame wasn't supposed to do it today, she said. The timing was his decision.
I know, he said.
He told me. She nodded. Of course he did.
Zara, he said.
Don't, she said quietly. Not harsh. Just certain. Don't start with I'm sorry.
I know you're sorry.
Sorry is the beginning of a conversation, but it isn't the conversation. Start with something true instead. He looked at her steadily. She had always required this. Not performance, not the correct emotional gesture, but the actual thing underneath. He had loved that about her. He had found it the most disorienting thing about her simultaneously. I have a son, he said, who I have never held, who is 3 years old and knows my name and my face, and has been raised with the truth about where he comes from, which is something you did for him rather than something I earned. And I stood in a boutique this afternoon holding a photograph of him, and understood, not intellectually the way I have been understanding things for 2 years at a safe distance, actually understood, in the way that doesn't let you go back to the previous version of yourself, what I have missed, and what I chose and what those two things cost. She was quiet. And I am not here to ask you to feel anything specific about that, he said. I am here because Ibo deserves a father who shows up, and that is something I can choose to become even if I cannot undo what I chose before. And I am here because he stopped.
He started again.
Because I have been hollow for 2 years, and I would rather tell you that than perform a version of myself that works from the outside. The silence after that was a different quality from all the previous silences. Something in her face moved, not collapsing, not the surrender of a woman who has been waiting to stop holding on. Something more like recognition, the specific look of a person receiving information they already knew was true and had been deciding whether to trust. Ibo asked Kwame last month if you knew what he looked like, she said. I know, he said. Kwame told me, and she said. And I want to know what he looks like in person, Hyun-woo said. Not in a photograph. I want to hear his voice. I want to know what makes him laugh. I want to know what he's afraid of and what he's decided he loves and what his face looks like when he is telling you something he thinks is important. He looked at her. I want to be his father. Not a fact he was told. His actual father. She looked at him for a very long time. That's not my decision to make alone, she said finally. I know, he said. I will ask him, she said. He is 3. He has opinions. He will tell me what he wants. Yes, he said. Another silence. Softer this time. The dress is extraordinary, he said. Something crossed her face that was close to the smile he remembered. The slow one, specific. The one that arrived only when something genuinely amused her. I know, she said. I've been making things for a long time. That one I made well. You made it for a wedding, he said. I made it because I needed to make something out of that year, she said simply. The dress was how that particular feeling became something I could hold in my hands and look at and decide what to do with. That's what making is for. He looked at her. And sending it to a bridal boutique? That was Kwame's idea, she said. I told him I wanted it to go somewhere it would be seen. He interpreted the instruction liberally. He always does, Hyun-woo said. Something passed between them then, the specific warmth of a shared knowledge, 2 people who both knew Kwame Mensah and what that meant, and in that warmth was the ghost of the 14 months, the specific texture of what they had built, alive still under everything that had happened to it. She felt it too. He saw it in the way she looked away briefly, not retreating, just being careful. The look of a woman who is choosing how much of herself to open, and in what order. I'm here for 3 more days, she said finally. Fashion week ends Thursday. I know, he said. Ibo is with my mother in Accra, she said. He didn't come on this trip. I know, he said.
You know a lot, she said.
The tone was dry, but not cold. Kwame is thorough, he said. The almost smile again.
He is, she said.
She looked at him steadily. I am not the same woman, Hyun-woo. I want you to know that before this conversation goes any further. I am built differently. I have a child and a business and a life I constructed on purpose, and I am not available to have any of that treated as secondary to whatever is convenient. I know, he said. I'm not here for something convenient. Then what are you here for? She asked. Directly. The way she always asked the most important questions, without cushioning, without permission for a soft answer. He looked at her. Everything, he said. If you'll allow it. Starting with whatever you'll give me today, and earning the rest. The council found out on Wednesday. He hadn't expected it to take even that long. The Kong organization's intelligence moved faster than most governments and considerably faster than most personal decisions, and the appearance of Kwame Mensah at the bridal boutique on Tuesday afternoon had been logged and flagged and arrived on the council chairman's desk by Tuesday evening. By Wednesday morning, Chairman Oh had made 3 phone calls, one to Seo-yeon's father, one to 2 senior council members, and one to Hyun-woo's personal line, which Hyun-woo did not answer. He was having breakfast with Zara. This had not been planned. He had walked her back to her hotel on Tuesday evening after 2 hours of conversation that had moved through everything and arrived nowhere final, not because they were avoiding the destination but because they both understood that the destination required more than one evening to approach honestly. At the door of the hotel she had looked at him and said, "Breakfast. 8 o'clock. There is a place 15 minutes from here that makes good coffee, if you know how to order it." He had arrived at 7:55. She had arrived at 8 exactly, in a simple rust-colored dress with her natural hair pinned loosely back, carrying a sketchbook she set on the table without opening, and she had ordered his coffee before he could ask how she knew what he took and said, without looking up, "You ordered the same thing every morning in Accra. People don't change their coffee." "Some things change," he said. "Not coffee," she said. And she opened her sketchbook and showed him what she had been working on, a new collection, still in early sketches, structured around the concept of things that exist in 2 places simultaneously, that belong to more than one world, that carry multiple inheritances in a single form. She explained it the way she always explained her work, with total commitment, no performance of modesty, the specific confidence of someone who knows what they are doing and finds the explaining as interesting as the doing. He listened the way he had always listened to her, completely, without the part of his mind that usually ran parallel calculations during conversations, just present with what she was saying and finding it genuinely absorbing. His phone vibrated 3 times during the hour. He did not look at it. After breakfast, she had a fitting with a Korean designer she was collaborating with, and he walked with her through the morning streets of Hanam-dong and felt, with the specific quiet clarity of someone who has been hollow for 2 years, what it was like to not be hollow. His phone vibrated again on the walk back. He looked at it then. Chairman Oh's name on the screen. "You need to take that," Zara said. She hadn't looked at the phone. She had read something in the quality of his attention shifting. "It can wait," he said. "No, it can't," she said. "I know what kind of calls don't wait. Take it." She stopped walking. "I'll be here." He stepped aside and answered. Chairman Oh spoke for 4 minutes. His voice was the controlled temperature of a man who had been making large decisions for a long time and had learned to deliver them without unnecessary heat. But underneath the control was something Hyun-woo recognized as genuine alarm, which meant the council was more unsettled than they were performing. The terms were straightforward. The engagement to Seo-yeon was to continue. Any contact with the Mensah woman was to cease immediately. The political alliance Seo-yeon's family represented was non-negotiable from the council's position, and if Hyun-woo chose to act in contradiction of the council's guidance on this matter, the council would be required to discuss the question of organizational succession. Succession. The word placed carefully like something heavy set down to demonstrate its weight. "I understand," Hyun-woo said. He ended the call. He stood on the pavement for a moment. Then he turned back to Zara. She read his face the way she had always read his face, accurately, quickly, without needing him to explain the architecture of what had just moved through it. "The council," she said. "Yes," he said. She nodded, the specific nod of a woman receiving confirmation rather than information. "They're using succession," he said. "Of course they are," she said. "It's their biggest instrument." She looked at him steadily. "What are you going to do?" He looked at her. "I'm going to need a few days." "You have until Thursday," she said. "After that I'm going home." "I know," he said. What happened over the next 48 hours was the thing that nobody in the council's history had adequately prepared for, which was Kang Hyun-woo using the organizational infrastructure that had been built to contain him as the instrument of his own liberation. He spent Wednesday afternoon in a meeting with his own lawyers, not the council's lawyers, his personal legal team, the ones who answered to him rather than to the collective. He spent Wednesday evening reviewing the organizational charter his father had written, the succession clause, and every precedent that had been invoked in its interpretation over the 20 years since it was drafted. What he found, buried in the third subsection of the succession protocol, was a provision that the council's chairman had apparently not revisited recently enough to remember. The provision stated that the succession clause could be invoked by the council only in the absence of a direct blood heir of the current organizational head. In the presence of a confirmed blood heir, the succession question was automatically deferred to the heir's majority. Ibo was his blood heir. He was 3 years old. Succession was deferred for 15 years. He called his lawyers back at 11 on Wednesday night and confirmed the interpretation 3 ways. Then he called Kwame Mensah. Kwame picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said. "Did you know about the heir provision?" Hyun-woo asked. A pause. "My lawyers are very thorough," Kwame said. "You knew," Hyun-woo said. "I suspected," Kwame said. "I wanted you to find it yourself." "Why?" "Because a man who finds his own door out of a cage understands his freedom differently than a man who is let out," Kwame said. "He's less likely to walk back in." Hyun-woo sat with that for a moment. "Kwame," he said, "I need to speak to your sister tonight." "I know," Kwame said. "She's awake." "She's been working." A pause. "She's been working since 9 this morning. She does that when she's thinking about something she hasn't decided yet." "Does she know about the provision?" Hyun-woo asked. "No," Kwame said. "This part is yours to tell." He went to the hotel. She answered the door in the rust-colored dress still, her natural hair loose now, sketchbook in her hand. She had literally been mid-sketch when he knocked, which meant Kwame had not warned her he was coming, which was its own kind of gift. She looked at him, at his face, at whatever was in his expression that told her this was a different kind of visit than Tuesday evening. "Come in," she said. He sat across from her in the small sitting area of her hotel room and told her everything. The council call, the succession clause, the heir provision, the 48 hours of legal architecture. He told it plainly, without performance, the way he had learned she required, the actual truth rather than the managed version. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "So, Ibo," she said carefully, "being acknowledged as your heir protects your organizational position." "Yes," he said. "And you're telling me this because," she started. "Because I want you to know that what I'm asking you has nothing to do with organizational protection," he said. "I found the provision last night. I could have used it without telling you it existed. I'm telling you it exists so you know the difference between a man who would use his son as an instrument and a man who is asking you to let him be his son's father, because that is what his son deserves." She looked at him steadily. The expression was the one she wore when she was deciding something important, not closed, not open, just the specific focus of a woman taking her time with the thing that required it. "I have one question," she said. "Ask it," he said. "Seo-yun," she said. "What happened there?" He told her. The boutique. What Seo-yun had said. The specific grace of a woman delivering her own freedom rather than waiting for someone else to give it. Zara listened to this with the focused attention she brought to everything, and when he finished she was quiet for a moment longer. "She sounds like someone who deserved better than an arrangement," Zara said. "She did," he said. "She knows it." She said so. Zara looked at her sketchbook, then back at him. "I am not going to decide anything tonight," she said. "I want you to know that. I am not going to be moved by a legal provision or a counsel or the relief of having an exit offered. Those are all reasons that belong to you. I need my own reasons." "I know," he said. "But I will let you meet Ibo," she said. "Properly. In Accra. On my ground, in my time, in the space where he is comfortable. And we will see what he makes of you, because he has his father's instincts and he will know something true within the first 10 minutes. "Yes," he said. "And we will see what I make of you," she said. "Over time. Because that's how I build things. Not fast and not without foundation." "I know," he said. "I watched you build for 14 months. I know exactly how you do it." Something moved across her face, The thing she had been keeping careful guard over since Tuesday evening. The thing underneath the composure. The thing that was still there despite 2 years and everything they had cost each other. She looked at him with it visible for exactly one unguarded second. Then she composed herself again, but more gently than before. The composure of a woman choosing to be careful rather than a woman needing to be defended. "Thursday I go home," she said. "I know," he said. "Accra is not Seoul," she said. "I know," he said. "I have been to Accra. I know what it is. I know what street finds you when you're supposed to be found." The almost smile became the actual smile. Slow, specific, the one that arrived only when something genuinely moved her. She didn't try to contain it. "Go home, Hyun-woo," she said. "And book a flight to Accra." He stood. He walked to the door. He stopped. "The letter," he said. "The 4th sentence." She looked at him. "I am well," he said. "I am more than well. You said that." "Yes," she said. "I believe you," he said. "And I intend to earn the right to be part of the reason for it." She held his gaze for a moment. "You have a long way to go," she said. "I have been told I am thorough," he said. She laughed. The real laugh. Full. Unguarded. Taking up all the available space in the room without apology. The laugh he had carried for 2 years in the most protected part of himself, because it was the one thing he had been absolutely unable to manage away. He left. He booked the flight from the car. 6 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon in Accra, in the living room of Zara Mensah's family home, Kwame Mensah looked up from the toy he was examining with a focused attention he applied to everything and assessed the Korean man sitting on the floor across from him with the specific thoroughness he had inherited from both of his parents. Then he held out the toy. An offering. The particular generosity of a child who has decided someone is worth including. Hyun-woo took it carefully. "Thank you," he said. Kwame studied him for another moment. "You have my face," Kwame said, with complete factual calm. "Yes," Hyun-woo said. "You have mine too." Kwame considered this information seriously. Then he nodded once, the nod of someone filing a confirmed fact, and turned back to his toys with the ease of a child who had asked the question he needed to ask and received the answer he required and was satisfied. Across the room, Zara was watching from the kitchen doorway. Her father was in his chair pretending to read. Her mother was in the kitchen pretending to cook. Kwame was on the sofa pretending to look at his phone. None of them were doing the thing they were pretending to do. Zara looked at Hyun-woo on the floor of her family home with her son beside him, and felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for 2 years and 4 months and would have remained unsettled indefinitely if she had let it. The specific settling of a woman who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has finally set it down in a place that can hold it. She was more than well. She had said so in the letter. She had meant it. She still meant it. And the meaning was growing, quietly, on a Sunday afternoon in Accra, with more room to grow than it had ever had before. Some stories take the long way. The detour through loss and absence, and the specific weight of choices that cannot be unmade. The ones that arrive after all of that walk through every version of the wrong ending and come out the other side with something real enough to build on. Those are the ones that last because they have already survived everything that could end them. Kang Hyun-woo chose duty once and called it necessity. He chose love the second time and called it the most difficult and correct thing he had ever done. Zara Mensah chose herself through every version of the in-between. She built her fashion label and raised her son, and made a wedding dress out of a year that deserved to become something beautiful, and sent it forward into the world with 4 sentences and a photograph because that was what she did. She made things, she made them well, and she trusted the making to say what needed to be said. Her father put down his book eventually and looked at Hyun-woo on the floor with his grandson and said, in Chui, to no one in particular, he stayed. It was his verdict. Finally. So tell me, do you think Zara was right to send the dress box, or was that a door she was opening while pretending it was closure? Do you think Seo-yeon was the most dignified person in this entire story? And if you were Hyun-woo, would you have found the air provision and used it, or would you have walked away from the organization entirely to earn her back without legal instruments? If this story moved something in you, subscribe to Afro Soul Connect so you never miss the next episode. Drop a like, Leave your city in the comments and send this to someone who needs a great love story today. We will see you in the next one.